It's a great day in our Beyond studio, and we've got a couple of really cool guests that I'm going to introduce you to here in just a moment. The way the story plays out is it was EDUCAUSE of last year when Gabrielle on our staff ran into Nicholas, and there was a conversation and some momentum built from it, and we learned about a whole area of higher ed that very few people talk about. And we thought, you know what, there's some really interesting things going on in this space. It's important and somewhat urgent that senior leadership at institutions take note of this area and at least have it on their radars. So let's bring on two experts, two people who are leading the charge at EDUCAUSE to kind of research this area, bring schools together, collaborate, and really solve problems as an industry. Right? So with me are Nicholas Colbert, Joseph Karam. I'm going to have both of them introduce themselves to us here in a moment. And then let's get into what the world is that the two of you live in, even though you're completely different institutions, and the work you're doing to bring other institutions together in this kind of shared vision, shared planning. Let's start with Nicholas. Nicholas, tell us, if you don't mind, the fast version of the story of you, like what even got you into higher ed in the first place, and how are you now sitting in the seat that you're sitting in at your institution?
The long story short, I started online in 1993 at Prodigy Communications Corporation and have literally done everything on the internet since. So almost 30 years of being online on the internet at enterprise level. 2 years ago, I was getting into higher ed. I worked for Integration Process as a Service for a company that did a lot of the California integrations. Then I left them and joined Emory about 2 years ago and moved more out of the application space and into the network monitoring space to also build applications for the network monitorings and the shared services of the network at Emory.
Awesome. Okay. And Joseph, how about you? The story of you and how you got to the seat you're sitting in now.
I've been working in higher education for about 30 years, and IT and University of Rochester, Hamilton College, and now at Princeton University, and just been doing a variety of roles, and mostly in infrastructure management, from servers, storage, networking, and doing monitoring all my life, basically, for all these critical systems. And now leading the monitoring team at Princeton for monitoring our network and servers and all the applications, whether they're cloud or on-premise applications.
So you've kind of given us a little hint on the area we're going to explore together today, right? This area of monitoring. Nicholas, let's start with you. When did this become a big deal to you? When did you realize, because you're fairly new into higher ed, that this is a big deal, it's important? And then Joseph, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the work you've been doing through EDUCAUSE in surveying other schools and where they are in this journey and bringing them along in that journey. But Nicholas, like, what raised the yellow flag, let's say, for you going, whoa, are people paying attention to this stuff?
Well, it's not so much bringing a yellow flag. My job title is Senior Manager of Monitoring and Tools. So it's like right there in my job title. But
yeah,
the first thing I would say is that everybody's assuming this is added on. I come from outside of higher ed, so I've been consulting for 30 years, worked at everything. Monitoring is in every single industry. Whether you're a marketing company monitoring your websites for up, down, monitoring your e-com platform for commerce velocity, there's all kinds of things. And the technology doesn't fundamentally change between whatever the problem is. It's the interpretation I think everybody has. So when I entered the monitoring space, I was actually having to get my network skills back up to what they were 30 years ago. And nothing really had changed fundamentally in the monitoring. But what I did find was everybody's got a different definition and everybody's talking past one another.
Joseph, how about you? Because one of the things I want to make sure listeners understand is this is not necessarily something to just kind of have in a silo off to the corner. Mm-hmm. There's a reason everyone at the institution should be aware of this, especially as they build strategy and deploy things. Give us your perspective, just some opening thoughts on this area and why we're trying to bring this to light.
Yeah, we've had monitoring services we've had for years, and we've always had someone leveraging some type of monitoring system, whether it was in a team or for a variety of teams. But there was just never any process defined, never any partnerships that were defined to actually make monitoring successful and to make it something worthwhile for the institution to make a priority. And so we've been building out processes over time and building out those partnerships where we can. And it's a slow process. You're not going to get everyone on board at the same time, working through one team at a time. It's been really rewarding for us in terms of building out the partnership together to say, all right, how does this application work? Can we provide as a monitoring service to make that application the best it can be? And then over time, we started saying, well, we actually have processes here. We can define, and we started defining best practices. We started defining what requirements we've been building into monitoring for the network, for our servers, and actually putting it into a requirements document. And then I met Nicholas, and then we took it to the next level, I think, last year.
Yeah, Nicholas, really what the two of you have kind of teamed up on, and you're working with a lot of institutions on this together, is you're building a maturity model, right? You're designing a framework. Why is it so important to have a kind of a common language across teams, potentially even across institutions? And what does this maturity model get us at the end?
Well, yeah, I think it starts with where Joe and I first met, and then we decided to go to EDUCAUSE and start this monitoring group for institutions. What I found was, and we were very scared that no one would show up to our initial thing, but it was a packed room. And the packed room of the user group really told me that the entire conference was really looking for a solution that didn't have the words AI in it.
Mm-hmm.
And because everything at the conference was AI focused, and we even led with that. We're not going to talk about AI here. And this comes from my consulting days. When you're in a subgroup at a major conference and it's a small room and that room is packed, you need to really take focus on that. And there were a lot of C-suite in that room. It wasn't just the guys that were, having to do the job. We had several C-suite people in there, and we had our speaker badge, and they'd be like, I've marked it down. I'm making that meeting. And then Joe and I started having this monthly meeting on Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of the month. And we started bringing everybody in. And it just became so apparent that every level has a different definition of what monitoring is and how you accomplish it. And that applies even to the whole OSI stack, from the application layer, which is where 90% of the light of everybody lives, to the lower layers.
Yeah.
And they all have these different thoughts of how it should work or what it should do. And it always comes to a head, I feel, when something breaks. Once something breaks, then everybody loses their minds and starts blaming the monitoring. Why weren't we monitoring? Why weren't we monitoring? This could have all been preventable. And then it gets fixed, and then they have their amnesia again.
Everyone forgets about it. So, Joe, what are some of the schools that have come alongside you to say, yeah, you're not alone? There's a lot of gaps in our understanding of how to do monitoring correctly. Let's do this together.
Yeah, we've had community colleges through research universities. Harvard and Yale have well-defined monitoring teams, and then Cornell has been on a number of our calls. Colorado, Boulder, great partner. UC San Diego, Natalie at UC San Diego has been a great partner. And then we've had smaller schools, Lehigh University, Alabama,
Just the
Birmingham.
whole gamut. Yeah.
Clemson, So we've had a number
so this isn't even an invitation for big schools, small schools, community colleges, private. It's like if you're running a technology stack, let's together work to innovate, learn from each other, and design the best possible framework that methodologies can come out of. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and quickly to do that, one of the first things that Joe and I identified was those names sound the same, but they're actually very, very different. Like you throw out the words Yale, Princeton, Harvard, Emory.
Yeah, you assume.
Well, you're assuming those are all the same, but here's the thing, and Joe, correct me. Princeton does not have any medical. Harvard and Yale, I think, do have medical, but very limited, like one school. In Emory, we are a medical network with 10 hospitals, 85 clinics, and a university. And that was one of the first things Joe and I, that's actually kind of what led to the maturity model, because we were like, we're talking about different things sometimes, or different challenges. We ran into one, I want to say it's Nebraska. It's they're the ISP of origin for K through 12 through the state. And it was always interesting as we got to talk, like, okay, what is the one thing that you all are doing that has nothing to do with what you're supposed to be doing?
That's right.
And that's, I think, what really led us there.
So, Joe, one of the things that helped you, or the two of you, get your arms wrapped around what's going on at all these institutions was you did kind of a fairly robust survey. Talk us through that.
Yeah.
What were you looking to capture, and what were some of the outcomes as you heard back from schools?
Yeah. So as we were building that maturity model, we basically looked at the different areas of the model, and we said, let's see where schools are in terms of where they fit into the model and where they see themselves in maturity. So level 1, very basic monitoring, to level 5 or more, to very advanced maturity, doing predictive analysis and proactive monitoring. So we did ask schools a number of questions about the number of staff they have defined for monitoring, whether or not they have a defined network operations center, how important monitoring is to their institution, and whether or not they have defined budget for monitoring tools, and then what type of tools they use, and what type of pain points they have with their monitoring tools. And it was I thought it was a great survey. We had over 100 responses across the network area, servers, and storage, and then communications and applications. Every institution, it was across the board, felt monitoring is very important or extremely important to their institution. Almost all the institution responses had less than one staff member defined for monitoring,
Wow.
and almost no budget, or sometimes that they had a smaller budget, and but it was right across the board. It was
Wow.
very
It
consistent.
was eye-opening.
Joe,
Yeah.
if a CIO listening or watching, or an IT director wanted to get their hands on some of that survey data to make a business case at their institution for why this needs to be taken more seriously, is that available from you guys? Can they reach out to you and
Certainly,
do
yes.
that? Okay, great. So
Yeah,
we'll give out
yeah.
some contact information before we're done, but I just wanted to ask that question on their behalf. Now, Nick, one of the things we'd love to quickly hear from you on is, what are the components of this maturity model that's being designed right now? What are the pieces to the puzzle? Kind of paint a picture for everyone so they can get a little into the weeds with you.
Well, we partnered with the various institutions Joe talked about, and what we came up with was, and this is where it switches over from monitoring to observability. You have to have the ability to gain insight into your system's health and collect data and correlate it and analyze it and get metrics and traces, so you can be proactive and detect issues, etc. But we came back one level and looked at it from more of a holistic of what do you actually need to do. And the first one is the application layer. So applications, that's easy. Everybody understands it. 2 is the cloud. 3 is your DNS, DHCP services. And now we're going to get technical, and all the CTOs will be yay, and the CIOs will be yay, and the presidents of the universities are going to be like, oh, great, he's going techie. But application, cloud, DNS, then the network, then your servers and your infrastructure, your storage capacity, your communication systems. 8 is power. And the 9th one is part of network, but it's your wireless network. And the reason I say the wireless network is, in my humble opinion, your wireless network is your canary in the coal mine, and it is all over your institution. It's all over, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a business, whether you're whatever. Your wireless network will tell you you have problems long before anything else does.
Interesting. That's interesting.
If you're looking for a silver
Yeah.
bullet from this entire podcast, it is monitor your wireless network.
And of course, there's a art and a science to it, I'm assuming, right? Just monitoring it for the sake of monitoring versus looking for trends, looking for insights. That's why I believe being part of a group like this could be so beneficial, is to see, what do you monitor? Like, what are you guys monitoring? What data points are you guys looking at? Where are you having your ahas?
Yeah.
Those are the questions that I think lead to the real breakthroughs. Joseph, staying on this idea of the maturity model and the components of it, I'm sure governance is one piece of it, right? But what are some of the other pieces of the model itself?
I talked about the partnerships already that we built within Central IT and also across the university. So we work with our library team, facilities, and other university departments in building out those partnerships, so we get the visibility Nicholas was talking about. Because without the visibility, the monitoring doesn't really work too well
Mm-hmm.
unless you work across many different departments. But the things that we put in place also were defined responsibilities and job descriptions for people, so that people have defined monitoring responsibilities. And then on the other end of the spectrum, setting performance goals for people to improve monitoring for their services. So not only for a monitoring professional like myself, but for someone in an application team or a server team that is a application developer or a server administrator, to have goals to say you're going to work on improving your monitoring this year and working with the monitoring team. And those communities of practice that we've built with people have been great, because we've expanded, we've trained people, we've gotten people on our platforms for monitoring, and we've been able to really expand our reach and visibility that we have. So that's,
So yeah, to that end, it's really about you're actually helping schools build a culture
mhm,
around monitoring. So it's not just another piece of my job. It's like it hopefully becomes an area of passion.
mhm,
Because speaking, Nicholas, of canary in the coal mine, if I can be the person who catches something before it happens, I can prevent a major escalation. And
mhm,
there's a lot to be said about that. Okay.
yeah.
Well, and also I think one of the things I've learned is we are so far past red, green, up, down, and I hear that in the industry. I need a board and I need red, green, up, down. We are past that. We are
Mm,
quality of service. I
Mhm,
mean, just because my stuff is up does not mean that my user is getting the experience they want. And that is it's going to look green, but it's not green.
because so in a very at a very layman, because I don't live in your world, but from a layman's perspective, this maybe goes back to something even as simple as monitoring the Wi-Fi, right? Just the fact that it's on does not mean that students are able to and faculty are able to get where they want to go correctly and at the speed they're
Hmm.
expecting, right? So that I
Yeah.
think that becomes what you're saying.
Yeah. When the testing software doesn't respond fast enough, teachers get grumpy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Talk about economy of scale. Either of you, whichever one find this topic interesting. Where does economy of scale play into this, especially in these institutions?
Yeah, some of the schools that answered in the survey do have a budget for monitoring. Some had very large staff members, and there were a few that did have very well-defined staffing and budgeting for tools for monitoring. But I would say, yeah, for larger schools, you do have to invest in when it's just not one tool. All leadership just wants to have one tool that can do everything, but there just isn't one tool that can do everything. So I would say at least one or two tools to leverage for larger institutions. And then we've spoken to some of the smaller schools that if they have one tool that they can use and one or half a staff member that can leverage that, that would be amazing. That if they had one small product that they could purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it changes, and we identify this. Like when you're a smaller school, you want one tool that does everything,
Mhm,
and that's budgetary and that way. With my economy of scale, I would love to have one tool that did everything, but there isn't one like Joe said. But also, I need the flexibility of walking.
Hmm.
I don't want to be vendor locked, and you're seeing that as all of these tool providers, and correct me, Joe, these tool providers are moving all to SaaS based, and they're
mhm,
all jumping their prices. Once they get you on the SaaS model, 10, 15, 20, 30%, year over
mhm,
year. I mean, it's,
Wow.
and we're not talking about once you move to the cloud or this, and you've got to take into your redundancy. And so as you get larger, you're going to get more tools and they're going to have redundancy across the tool. But I want that because I want to be able to tell one of these vendors, hey, you just jumped my price year over year by 20%. I'm not going to pay that, but I still need the ability to look into my communications and have
Right.
observability and monitoring.
mhm,
Right. That makes sense. Let's say I'm at an institution, and if I had taken the survey, I may have had one person to a half person, but maybe I had nobody, literally, like dedicated to this work. So then the question becomes, where do we start? What are some recommendations from you guys for institutions who are just getting started on this journey? They're understanding the urgency of this. They're glad you guys exist because they're going to come pick your brain and the collective brain of this group. But yeah, recommendations on where to get started.
We had this exact happen at our conference where a young man, he stood up and he said, this is part of my job. I've been given no money, I have no staff, and they want a solution tomorrow. And we did come up with impossible monitoring tasks. So on our forum for higher education, if you remember of EDUCAUSE, you can come out there and put, this is what I'm trying to do. If you put something out there on it on that group, my team, which is 7, I'll throw it out in our chat, and they'll, as they go through their day, they'll throw out suggestions and thoughts and whatever. And we're pretty experienced across a lot of platforms. But
Wow,
we
that's
did have
great.
this exact, your hypothetical exactly occurred.
Wow. Joe,
Yeah,
anything
and
else you would want them to think about? So first, it sounds like don't pass go, don't collect $200, get to this EDUCAUSE group. We'll give them some details on how to do that before we finish up. But anything else they should be thinking about or considering before even doing that?
yeah, well, we shared the requirements document as well. So the requirements that people may have for monitoring their network, their servers, to help them out with a framework to say, let's get started in these areas to get our monitoring in place. And you could do it with low-cost tools. You don't have to go out and buy the Cadillac of monitoring tools to get the work done. We have some of lower-cost tools that my group uses, and we use them to the fullest, and they do a lot for us.
Oh, that's encouraging. That between going through the framework that you guys have worked on, and I'm assuming in that, or even in conversation with other schools, you could quickly find out what are some of the low cost things I can jump on and get started with, and then kind of mature my model as we go, right?
Yeah, and I try to work when I talk to vendors as well. I just say, I want to try out your tool for a year for these specific items, just because they will try to sell me everything that they can, and I just will try to look for a specific use case where I can say, will I get value from the tool for using this for a year? And then usually leadership will like that type of direction versus trying to buy some large tool and not really have a whole idea in mind of how to use it and how to leverage it. So
There's so much more to talk about, gentlemen, but since we're kind of coming tight on time, would love to hear some closing thoughts from each of you. Anything that's top of mind for you, how to get in contact with the group. Let's start with Nicholas.
My top of mind is define what monitoring is going to mean and observability is to your institution. There is no standardized process out there at all. Everything's siloed. Everybody's reactive right now. And I think that's one of the things is everybody's selling, all the vendors are selling the one-stop solution. I would go back to what I said. The things I would look for in a tool if I was a C-level is a very, very, very good API stack. If that tool does not have an API stack that is good, I wouldn't even bother looking at it.
Makes sense. Joe, thoughts from you?
yeah, just continuing to build from the ground. Don't try to solve every problem, on day one, and try to, grow and have a plan, because we've learned things over the 3-year period we've had the monitoring services team. From the dashboards we built 3 years ago to the dashboards we're building today are a lot different, and the services we provide today, we have so much more visibility, and it does take time. And institutions should realize that you can't have everything monitored, but having a plan, like Nicholas was saying, setting up governance and having management buy-in to ensure that people are getting alerts, are getting reports that they need that are actionable, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, my big takeaway from listening to the two of you is, number one, the importance of this not being a siloed department or a human hiding somewhere in a corner. The C-suite, the leadership needs to understand how important and urgent this is. And to your point from earlier, Nicholas, just because everything worked today and nothing blew up doesn't mean it was a great day. It just means there may be a couple canaries singing in the coal mine that we just don't know about, right? So how do we get a shared language? How do we prioritize this? How do we follow a good framework and resource it appropriately, and then build kind of this culture of service? And the reason to monitor is to provide good service, not to, keep from blowing up, so to speak. That's another takeaway for me. And a maturity model like the one you guys are designing and sharing with everyone brings some structure to this thing. It brings visibility. Just like you were saying, an executive may be looking at different information than the CIO, than the person actually doing the work. But it brings visibility across all those layers. And through that brings some alignment, right? Like it's not like, what do we have monitoring? Why do we do that? When do we do that? Right? There's some visibility around it. So just in closing, gentlemen, Anybody listening who's serious about service and security and safety will want to follow up with you, will want to kind of follow what you guys are doing. What are a couple of the best ways to do that? How do they connect with you in this group that's formed through EDUCAUSE?
Well, I mean, if you're in EDUCAUSE, go to the EDUCAUSE website and go to the community groups. I'm assuming you guys will put a link in it for the podcast. If you're not in EDUCAUSE and you come across this and you're in a similar institution, reach out on LinkedIn to Joe and I. We're both on LinkedIn, more than willing to help.
Okay, that's great. And at EDUCAUSE, it's called the monitoring group, right? The discussion board is
Enterprise
the monitoring group.
Enterprise
monitoring group. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great, gentlemen. It was great. I
Thank
learned
you.
a ton because this was certainly not on my mind. And we spend a lot of our time with college presidents, and I can assure you it's not on their mind until something's blowing up. So if anything, this should just put it on their radar. It should put it on everyone's radar, and then trust that a good framework is taking care of it, and then they can go back to doing what they do all day long. But the framework's important. Dedicating resources and people to it is important. If we're down, we are down. So thank you for all you guys are doing. And hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon to report back on maybe there's now 100 institutions that have collaborated with you and all the good work that's coming out of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Make it a great day.
Thank you.